Today's video is brought to you by lots of coffee because somehow I was up at some ungodly hour of 3 o'clock in the morning because I'd fallen down into the hole of YouTube binges. This has been happening way too often lately. Okay, sidetrack. Now onto the books. I'm here today to do my mid-monthly wrap-up because I figure that I read quite a lot, so I thought I would do 2 a month, so every fortnight or just kind of wherever it fits in. The first book I read this year was kind of like, it's totally not something that I read often, and the book is Master and Your Mean Girl by Melissa Ambrosini, and I really love this and I was kind of surprised by it. I just picked it up on a whim. I was reading the preview on my e-reader and I just kind of needed to keep reading. It's the first self-help book I've ever read before and I felt like I got a lot of knowledge out of it. It's definitely something that I think I'd like to own physically now, so I can return back to it. Still felt like every part of the book was useful and that the way that she was writing felt really real and honest, and I really appreciated that. I just felt like she did a really good job at that, so I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I just really enjoyed it. Okay, this is my reading journal that I've started a little while ago, but I made it like more like little reviews that I can put in. For this year I have like a little title page for the year, which is really cute, and I've just been writing like little reviews for each book. So the next book I read was Naked in Death by J.D. Robb, or Nora Roberts. Same person, same author. I honestly don't know how she writes that many books. It's kind of mind-blowing. Again, something that isn't really what I normally read. I read just so many different genres that a lot of the times the books I read are not what I normally read. This is the first book in a really big crime series, and I'd wanted to get to it for a while and I just got it on my e-reader and I loved it as much as I thought I would. It's so good. It has made me really excited that there is 40 books in this series so that I can just kind of slowly make my way through it. This book, Naked in Death, follows Eve Dallas, who is a cop in futuristic New York. She's trying to solve a murder of a prostitute who kind of has some political family connections, and they're trying to see how this all kind of ties together. So the setting of this book is kind of what got me going. It's in the future. I don't know how far in the future. This book was written like 20 years ago, but it's set in futuristic New York, and the kind of discussions about political changes was like awesome. So in this futuristic New York there is total gun ban, and when this prostitute turns up dead by a gunshot or by several gunshots, it's kind of easier to track down the person because not a lot of people own guns. You read from Eve's perspective and you see that the gun ban is something that pretty much everyone agrees upon, and only really kind of right-wing people want that back. So it's interesting to see her perspectives on this because it's still an issue in today's society, not really in Australia, but in America it still is, and it's interesting to see the perspectives of this 20 years ago and how it's still kind of relevant because there still isn't any stricter gun regulations, and the way that Eve looks at it, she kind of sees it as almost barbaric to have the lack of these regulations because it caused so many deaths and murders, and yeah, I just really appreciated that. I also really loved the romance in this, and it was kind of why I was heading towards this as like my foray into crime, because not that I've read much romance either, but it was also another genre that I've been trying to get into, so I'm trying to get into romance and crime at the same time, and this just kind of felt like the right way to do it, and I really loved it. It was just great. The next book I finished was Ober Newton by Isabel Carmody, and I love this as well. It's kind of a running theme. I like a lot of books. Okay, sidetrack. Yeah, I enjoyed this, and I was kind of confused at the beginning because I thought it was fantasy. Well, I started reading it, I'm like, hang on, this isn't straight fantasy. This is kind of the post-apocalyptic fiction. And I was like, yeah, okay. Post-apocalyptic fiction is kind of one of my favourite genres. But I liked how it was written because it kind of felt like a fantasy, and it had me going for a while. I was like, is it fantasy? Is it not fantasy? It's science fiction written like a fantasy, and that's essentially what it is, and it's awesome. So it follows the world after like quite a number of years, like generations after sort of a nuclear holocaust has taken place, and the side effects of this holocaust is that some people get defects. If they're born with a physical defect, they are pretty much killed straight away, or if they develop a hidden one, so a mental defect such as like telekinesis or telepathy, they are normally found out a bit later in life. They're found out by the government, they are labelled misfits and set off to farms to kind of work for the government and look for white stick, which is essentially like nuclear material. Our main character, Elspeth, yeah, it's kind of it's a weird one to spit off the tongue. She is, I think, 13 or 14. She's quite young, and she has these powers, and she knows straight away that she has them. It's and she knows that they're bad, like by the government. So, it doesn't stop her from using it. She seems like a really curious character, especially straight off the bat. The thing that sold me on this book was that she could use her mind-reading powers to talk to animals, and that's essentially like having talking animals in a book. So the animals can't really talk, but because she can mind read, they can, and I love talking animals so much in books. It's just one of my favourite things ever, I'm not gonna lie. And yeah, so in the beginning of the book, Elspeth gets discovered by the government as being a misfit, and she is labelled as such and sent off to Obernewtyn, which is this community that is on the far edges of their settled community, and everyone thinks that there's something going on there that's kind of a creepy place. And it is, and that's kind of where the book goes off from, and I loved it. I felt like it was such a beginning book, and I know it's relatively short compared to its sequels, and now that this series has been finished, like all the volumes are published, I think I can finally actually like go into the series. So I intend to read the sequels fairly like soon. I have the next 2 books out from the library, and I intend to read them really soon, as soon as I can, pretty much. The next book I finished, I got out from the library. My first library haul of the year. I actually have a physical copy of Unspeakable Things by Laurie Penny. I really liked this. It was kind of a tough read in the fact that, not that it was difficult to read, it was very well written and very easy to read. It was just that sometimes the content was quite strong and a little triggering, especially in the first chapter. So this book is about feminism, and Laurie Penny's kind of experience being a journalist and an activist, and a lot of the things she was talking about were kind of like the title says, unspeakable things that we don't really want to talk about because they're really tough to kind of wrap your head around and go, I can't believe this is actually happening. And but it was still really enlightening, and I really enjoyed her writing. It was really good and really honest and just straight up, this is what's happening and this is how she sees it. And I just really enjoyed it. The next book I finished is my first graphic novel of the year, and it is Deadpool Classic Volume 2. I read Classic Volume 1 last year, I don't know how long ago. I'm actually borrowing them off my sister's boyfriend because I can't really afford to buy them at the moment. And I really liked it. I actually think I liked the second volume more than the first, because the first one had a lot of like standalone single issues that had been drawn from other series of comics that starred Deadpool, where this one had more of like a continuous Deadpool story, and it was more focusing on him, and I really enjoyed that because I love Deadpool as a character. He's probably one of my favourite Marvel characters, and I'm so excited for the movie. I can't even. I love Deadpool. He's so funny. I love his meta moments. Just God, meta anything, and I'm sold. But seriously, Deadpool's fantastic. The next thing I finished really recently. I think I finished it 2 or 3 days ago. Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice. I have had this sitting on my shelf for literal years. I'm not even joking. I think I bought this back in 2012. The main reason I wanted to read this is because I had watched the movie I think twice, maybe like 5 years ago, and I loved it. I'm not a huge fan of Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise or even Kirsten Dunst, but I just loved that movie. I thought it was great, and I still wanted to get to this. I started reading it, and straight away I noticed how similar it was to the movie, and I was kind of surprised with how much I remembered of the movie since it's been quite a while. And I had troubles with the writing at first because it is kind of like an interview, so there's lots of speech, and it's mainly Louis speaking to an unnamed interviewer who is just called The Boy, and the jumps from the story that Louis is telling to him actually giving the interview was a little bit jarring at first, but I kind of just ignored it after a while because I was getting so into the story. The writing got better as it went through. I found myself stopping at points and just rereading like a paragraph and going, oh my goodness, this is fantastic. I think I loved it more than the movie, but since I haven't seen the movie in such a long time, I don't know if I can really compare. I do love vampires in stories, and I like Anne Rice's portrayal of them. I like the male-on-male relationships in this, and I love the characters. They're so well crafted, and they are all very different and have different motives for everything, and it's just delightful. I just really enjoyed it. The last thing I finished recently, and that is Lock and Key Volume 1. I am the biggest Joe Hill fan, even though I haven't read all these books. I fell in love. I read Heart-Shaped Box a few years ago and just was like, holy whoa, this was fantastic. I loved the art. It's let me try and find a page. Yeah, see? I really liked it, and I liked the story. It was creepy, and I didn't really find it scary, but I did find it creepy, which is a good sign. And I really enjoyed it. I want the next ones like immediately. I need it. I need it in my life. This is absolutely fantastic. The hype is real with this one. Oh, so good. So those are all the books that I've finished in the last 2 weeks or so. I guess that's all for this video. Seems like it's going a bit long. Hopefully I can cut it down. Thanks all for watching. Happy reading, and bye!